evening, Planet Earth. Welcome to Extraordinary Year, the online show about 2012 for everyday people like you. I'm Tim Bravo, and I am grateful you're joining us tonight. 204 days until December 21st, 2012. Remember, if you like the show, don't forget to like our Facebook page at facebook.com/extraordinary year. It's a great way to keep on top of alternative news you might not learn about otherwise. Our guest tonight is Dr. Chet Snow. He's an author and lecturer who has deep knowledge about an array of subjects that I can safely say would interest regular listeners of this show. Among them, past life regression, the Mayan calendar, and the crystal skulls, as well as the subject we'll be focusing on tonight, crop circles. He joins us from Kona, Hawaii, where he's preparing for a gathering to observe the upcoming Venus transit. Dr. Snow, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tim. It's aloha. Great pleasure to be with you today.
Now, specifically, I want to talk with you tonight about the Venus transit, which for listeners who may not know is where the planet Venus will cross between the Earth and the Sun in just a few days, and it won't happen again until the year 2117. But before we get into that, I'd like to set the stage by mining your understanding of crop circles, Doctor. As you understand it, how are authentic crop circles made?
Well, I suspect that there are more than one way. There's more than one way, but probably the most common way that the non-human attempted circles are made is by a type of spinning energy called a plasma vortex. And plasma vortices can be engendered naturally in electrical storms. They also can apparently be manipulated by intelligence. The difference with the crop circle is that it does seem to be intelligently controlled, because the plasma vortex not just spins in a circle, but it makes designs that have meaning to us that we can see geometrically, and also can be looked at scientifically for the residue from the vortex and things like that. There, before the days of digital photography and Photoshop, a few pictures have been taken of these vortex points as they were spinning in a circle already formed, because they don't just disappear apparently, and also very few, counted on one hand, at the time circles were forming, usually in a time of intense electromagnetic activity. I was very fortunate back in 2000 to take one myself in a formed crop circle, and it's been shown many times of an actual vortex. It's spinning, it's pink, and it was taken with a ordinary non-digital, film camera.
Amazing. So you actually got it as it was forming.
The crop circle was preformed. It was actually there in the middle of the night, and I was one of the first people in it. It was very electrical. You could feel your hair standing up a little bit like a Van de Graaff generator, and I had a crystal skull with me. Now, that's a whole other thing, but crystal does tend to excite and amplify electromagnetic energy, and I followed essentially what I considered to be instructions from the crystal skull, which was take a picture of me right there. And I set it down, and I stepped back, and I took the picture, and not till I had it developed did I realize that I had in fact taken one of the dozen or so plasma vortex pictures taken that could not have been photoshopped, because it was well before the days of Photoshop. This was in July of 2000.
Amazing. Well, that was going to be my question, is whether you actually saw it.
No,
when you took
you don't see it. You feel it.
Well, I know that people who have been in crop circles say they feel an energy, so apparently it actually just kind of hangs around there.
Apparently it does for about 3 days. It's 72 hours is what we found. You know, Nancy Talbot, who works with the BLT research team out of Cambridge, Mass., has talked about this many times. People can look up, if you look BLT, just like the sandwich, BLT research, you'll probably, in crop circle, you'll no doubt in Google get a lot of hits on things.
Wow, informative and hunger-causing. Suddenly that sounds like a phenomenal snack. So what year was it that you took that photo?
This was in July of the year 2000. As I say, pre-digital cameras, at least pre my having a digital camera. It was just an ordinary, old, normal camera, nothing special, nothing fancy. Wasn't a throwaway, but one that used a standard Kodak film. And then later I took another one in 2001, which actually has an orb. And again, I'm working with crystal skulls. What we found is that the crystal in the crystal skulls excites energies, and you get more of these kind of possibilities when you're in the crop circles. The crop circles themselves, like I say, they come from a plasma vortex that spins, usually in darkness, sometimes in late afternoon light. I think that this is intelligently designed so that the very few people will be around, because it could actually be somewhat dangerous to be involved in a crop circle when it's forming. We've had just a handful of examples of insects that have been found crushed, or ants or bugs, and a couple of instances of hedgehogs or porcupines. Oh. And they were sort of like flattened, and the quills all turning in the same area as the circle.
Well, that was going to be my question. What happens to a poor mammal who happens to get stuck in that energy?
Well, what happens to a porcupine or a hedgehog who don't, they don't run. They hunker down. Apparently, they get walloped. That's all I can say. We have lots of evidence that birds have flown out of fields very fast, leaving feathers behind and such in other circles over the years. So I think that we have to understand that they're not something to be taken lightly. They don't go against the laws of physics. There are physical causes that work with the electromagnetics. The most fascinating aspect from our point of view is that there does seem to be a non-visible intelligence that's able to manipulate our physical laws enough to create them and create geometric shapes that have meaning and follow the principles of what's called sacred geometry. One thing about crop circles is genuine crop circles, I've never seen one yet that wasn't aesthetically somehow pleasing. More to some people than other people, but they're not ugly, and they don't look like scrawled drawings of a child. They look like really geometric works of art.
I agree. But who is making these things?
Well, there we go. What intelligence are we talking about? That is, of course, the $64 million question. And I don't think we have an answer today, just as we didn't have an answer back in 2000 or back in 1991 when I went into my first crop circles. What's that, 20 years ago? My wife and I found that this is an incredible mystery, and it keeps us coming back. And maybe that's one of the purposes of the circle makers, as we call them. I do personally think that they are non-physical intelligence that has the ability to reach into our three-dimensional physical world and create an impact in these geometric forms and shapes. And they use geometry as their language. So you don't get written letters and things like that. That's very crude. You get geometry. And geometry is, of course, amazingly sophisticated mathematics. One of the mathematicians over in England actually found 2 or 3 theorems that go beyond Euclid that he devised primarily by studying the early crop circles from the early 1990s.
Well, and that begs the question, when did these things start?
Well, as far as we know, they go back to at least the time of the Renaissance and possibly even earlier. Obviously, we haven't had photographs of them until the 20th century. There were, though, discussions and even in some geographical and geometrical type mathematical magazines in the 19th century. There's a guy who's a physicist. His name is Jeffrey Wilson. He lives in the Midwest, and he has done quite a bit of research on the sort of history of crop circles. But like today, what happens is the mainstream media all but ignores them and just sort of poo-poos them. And in those times, especially when we didn't have airplanes, that people couldn't imagine that something could fly through the air that wasn't a bird or a physical object and create something on the ground. In the very olden days, they were called the devil circles. There's even a very well-known now a woodcut that was in a paper journal of a paper, newspaper, one of the first ones in the 18th century, 17th century, I think it was in 1640-something, who came with a story of a farmer who didn't want to pay the high wages his laborers were requiring, and he said, the devil take the field, and the next day the field had been mowed down in circles, and they said it was the mowing devil taking the field, so it was crop circles.
Huh. Interesting.
We've also had crop circles in over 30 countries, and probably in the tens of thousands, if you want to count them all, just since the modern phenomenon started in the early 1980s. The first ones that were photographed in modern photography were in 1978 in Warminster, England, which is a little village, actually a little city southwest of London, not far from Bath.
Now, is that the big, long one that Led Zeppelin put on one of their covers?
No, that was in 1990. The first ones came in, like I said, the late 70s, early 80s, and it's interesting you say that because there's really a couple of distinct periods with the early circles. Early circles, as far as we know, there were never more than 3 or 4 a year, and they were quite simple. The most complex were what are called a Celtic cross, in that they would be a central circle or ring around it with 4 circles representing the 4 points of the compass. Sometimes a ring would be done around that, and sometimes there would be 1 or 2 circles going down in a vertical fashion, like you would think of the old crosses in ancient cemeteries in Scotland or places like that, what they call Celtic crosses. Those date from the early to mid-1980s. Then, very interestingly, between 1987 and 1988, there was a quantum shift that took place. Remember, crop circles in England come to between May and August, primarily, because that's when the growing cycle is for cereal crops. And they've been known to come in many different crops, but the main ones are barley and wheat, although they also come in what's called rapeseed or canola oil, flowering plants. So just to finish that thought, what happened apparently in August of the year 1987 is tied to the Mayan calendar. That was called the harmonic convergence, and it occurred just at the end of the crop circle season. So nothing happened in 87, but in 88, the numbers of circles that were discovered suddenly went from 10 or 11 to 52 in a single year.
And I assume they got more complex as well.
And they begin to get more complex. And then another leap took place in 1990 when the long ones, like you're talking about, the first pictograms, as they called them, appeared. And one of the very first ones of those was in Wiltshire, England, and it was around, I don't have a date in my mind, but it was in July of 1990. And it was the one that got a lot of attention and got put into the paper, and I think the Led Zeppelin and some others, noted it.
So do these continue to get more complex?
Well, they have. Oh, yes, absolutely. Perhaps they change every year. I don't know if we could say they're more complex today than they were 5 or 6 years ago, but certainly up until the mid-2000s, 2004, 2005, in that time frame, they were getting more complex every year, although every year there's always some simple ones, very basic geometry that comes along to tell us. Now, it wasn't until 2002 that we recognized Mayan glyphs in a crop circle. And in fact, there was a glyph which meant the ancient ones. It also means the Milky Way that occurred. And that was in 2002. And then in 2004, there were 2 different sets of circles, and 2005, another 3 or 4. So since 10 years ago, the 10 years before 2012, we have been being primed for the 2012 event. by more and more Mayan symbols coming through, very complex symbols coming through, some of them highly mathematical that it requires a mathematician to really understand them, at the same time incredibly beautiful.
Well, okay, so it kind of brings me to my next question. What are they trying to tell us?
Well, people have spent 20 years trying to understand that. I have spent 20 years going through them and being part of them. My personal interest is experiencing the energy of them and feeling the change. There has been definitely changes in energy that have gone on with them. Now, in 2006, we had the first one that showed the Mayan symbol for Venus, interestingly enough. And so we've been being primed to understand the crop circles as they come along since at least the early 2000s. And I believe they're pushing us into the direction of understanding more of the Mayan calendar, understanding the influence of Venus, which is a big part of the Mayan calendar, and we know this year with the transit, that's a major event of 2012. I personally feel one of the strongest ones. My own feeling is that by December 21st, the horse will be out of the barn by that time. In other words, most of the things that are going to happen will have occurred, and either we'll be celebrating or we won't be. That's just my personal feeling.
Well, I for one hope that you're correct in that something will actually finally shift between now and then.
Well, I think that we have the choice. This is the thing. This is what the Venus transit is all about. It's about the choice. And the crop circles present us with information. They also tickle our fancy and our curiosity. And that is one of the main teaching tools that I think that they present to us. These circle makers, whatever we want to call them, intelligent beings, I do believe they are. I think they're more interdimensional than extraterrestrial. That's just my own personal point, because they know an awful lot about the Earth and how Earth works and how our sacred geometry works. Many of them are based on the golden mean, which is a very important symbol, and
meaning
teases us. The 1.61 ratio, 1 to 1.61 ratio. That's inherent in all of great art, great paintings embodied that. Leonardo da Vinci was a master at that. I think they say none of Leonardo's paintings did not, at some way or another, embody a hidden golden mean relationship, a ratio in the painting. That's why, even though there aren't too many of them, they're probably among the very most sought after and expensive paintings in the world. He was a great scientist. He was also a great mystic. Leonardo was. So crop circles are showing us a way of looking at our planet, and they're interfering with our food chain too. And so part of their message may well be that if we don't sit up and take notice, we may lose the bounty of this incredible planet, which is our Earth. You know that we're out here working with indigenous elders or earth keepers quite specifically to take advantage of the energy opening of the Venus transit and the portal that will be coming open during June 5th and 6th to hopefully to have an influence through these elders who have kept the knowledge of how you work with these intelligences over their time and from their cultures. Wise women primarily, interestingly enough. Several grandmothers from the Council of 13 Indigenous Grandmothers are going to be here. Several Hawaiian elders are going to be here. And we will be on the land of Pele, on the volcanic land itself, to essentially get into contact with the Earth through the volcano, through the island that this particular island chain represents for the entire planet. That's what we're doing. That's been my vision for a number of years now, and actually inspired by the crop circles. And I feel that the crop circles are motivating people all over the world to get curious about what is out there that's bigger than our 3D reality that we get every day.
Well, and that kind of brings you back to the Venus transit, because I know you believe at least a couple of past crop circles have pointed to this cosmic event that's coming up in just a few days. So,
oh yes, more than a couple.
What about these? Okay, excellent. What about these? So I guess a handful, several crop circles. Why do you believe that they're pointing to the Venus transit?
Well, they've been very gently introducing us to this subject. And as I said, starting way back in 2002 or even earlier, to the concept of the Mayan calendar. They have been showing us the five-pointed star for a number of years, and the five-pointed star, you know, is the pentagonal series of Venus, as it's called, where, again, we come back to the 1 to 1.61. It's an 8 to 5 ratio, where 8 crossings of Venus equal 5 navigations of the Earth around the Sun, 5 orbits around the Sun. And when you plot them together, you get this incredible dance, essentially, going across the Sun. Just last summer, one of the most amazing circles took place on the 29th of July at a place of all places called Inkpen. I can't invent the British names. And it was a sun serpent, an incredible serpent with a trident mouth like a tongue. I'm looking at a picture of it on my computer as I talk to you, with a big disc in the center, and there were, the numerology was quite amazing. There were 29 circles going around, and they were very cleverly divided into 2 parts of 18 and 11. And if we know the Mayan code of the long calendar, 18 and 11 points up to the certain date in August of last year, 2011. And that was the date when Venus was on the other side of the Sun from the Earth, which is called the superior conjunction. And now, on June 5th, it will be on the inside of the Sun, between the Sun and the Earth, and becomes the inferior conjunction or transit. So you see, the way the astronomy lines up was all being given to us in one crop circle, like a shorthand, back in July, pointing to August of last year, and then pointing further from August into our June 5th, June 6, 2012, which will be the inferior conjunction or transit. And that's just one example. We had other ones that came up last year where there were an incredible three-dimensional model based on cubic geometry, with a central sun in the center, and then what we would call pentagram symbols of Venus, a five-pointed star, orbits of Earth, Venus, and Sun all being shown around the Sun. It was quite an amazing one, with lines that were no more than 6 inches wide at some points.
Now, did this one point to a particular date?
Well, this one was actually pointing toward the date of the Venus transit, which is June 5th or June 6th in England. So they all pointed to June 6th, and because in England the Venus transit takes place on June 6th. Here in the United States, and especially in Hawaii, where the transit is visible, in England it's not very visible because it'll be after sunset. It's going to be in the middle of the night. Here it's in the afternoon. And so we will be seeing the transit. It takes 6 hours to complete, from noon or a little after noon until 6:30 at night. It's an amazing phenomenon. It's like an eclipse, but because Venus is so much further from the Earth, it doesn't cover the Sun like the Moon does. And this comes in conjunction with a very rare solar eclipse that took place just 2 weeks ago, on May 20th, which was visible in my home state of Arizona. And so I was up on Lake Powell at Page, Arizona, to watch that eclipse. And now we're out here in Hawaii. So I guess you could say that not only are we circle chasers, we're Venus chasers right at the moment, or we're eclipse chasers. Well, I don't know.
And you know, I just thought of this question. Are there any other planets, or to your knowledge, are there other planets that these crop circles seem to reference as often as Venus?
No. The other closest one possibly is Mars, and Mars has shown up a few times, but not to the extent that Venus has. And I think that is because of Venus's rather unique place in the solar system, much as Earth. I don't want to go into this in great detail, but I'm sure you must be familiar, and your listeners familiar, to the work of Zecharia Sitchin.
Yes.
Who wrote 12th Planet, and then many other works based on his knowledge of ancient Sumerian being one of the 40 or 50 people when he was alive who could read the cuneiform B tablets that the Sumerians conveniently left on clay tablets there in Iraq, until a lot of them were looted. But never mind, I won't go into that. So that Sitchin always said that Venus had a very unique place in the solar system because in the early days, Venus did not have the same orbit that it does today. And in fact, in ancient times, Venus was called the Wanderer, sometimes seen as bearded. And in some ancient mythologies, Venus is seen as male and the god of war. And in other ancient mythologies, as the ones that have come down to us, Venus is the planet of the goddess of beauty. And so there was an ancient saying in Roman times that Venus goes to bed as a woman but wakes up as a man. So I suppose that would be careful who you go to bed with. Because Venus is in a unique position vis-a-vis the Earth because she is the closest in orbit to the Earth. And also Venus is the most brilliant nighttime object next to the Moon. Now, our Moon obviously is much closer to the Earth, so we see it very big and a planetary. Like Venus is the next, it's brighter than any star, and oftentimes it's called a star because, of course, they didn't make a distinction between planets and stars back in those days. But Venus has this very unique position that because its orbit is close to us and close to the Sun, it transfers itself in being visible in the night sky for a certain part of those years of orbits that goes around the Sun, and then almost over a very short period of time, it goes behind the Sun and then comes out as the morning star. So, and it's the same planet, obviously, and we know the same light, and the ancient astronomers came to understand that they were dealing with the same celestial body, which to whom they gave intelligence. All the celestial bodies in ancient lore were considered to have intelligence, to have a personhood. And so Venus had personhood, and Earth too, of course, Gaia, as they were called, and the Moon and the Sun and all the celestial beings. So this is something that the elders and the wisdom keepers, the Earth keepers, have still understand that we've lost. It's why we're really working with the indigenous out here at this time, because they know how to get in touch with that intelligence, and this is something our Western civilization has really lost a lot of. And I feel the crop circles are calling us back to it, to come back to the crop circles a little bit. So when we're talking about Venus, we're talking about a split personality, you might say.
The whole male-female thing?
Yes, and also the beauty, as the evening Venus is seen as beautiful and a harbinger of peace and love, but the morning Venus is a harbinger of violence and stirs up catastrophe or disasters. In human history, this has been the case. In fact, Maya, for them, Venus was a male. They called Venus Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, which was a hurricane god. And they often said that when Venus came back around out and became the morning star, that was a sign that violence would be unleashed, and they often had wars at that time.
Huh. I guess I didn't realize that Venus was equated with Quetzalcoatl. Yes.
Yeah, the shining serpent, the flowing serpent, the flying serpent. Because Venus did not stay in the same place in the sky, you see, at one point. There was a time in ancient history that Venus was unstable, apparently, in its orbit, and in some of its passes near to the Earth caused catastrophes, very possibly.
Now, this is
very old. Very, very old.
Are you familiar? I mean, knowing what I know about you, I'm going to assume that you are, but are you familiar with Edgar Cayce then?
Oh, yes, of course.
And his readings in regard to Ra, and Ra being just kind of like a planetary soul, group soul for the planet Venus. Yes, Ra-Ta, of course, was one of his incarnations, right? Way long ago, between Atlantis and Egypt. And he had been a priest who worked with the king. Who I'm not sure worked directly with Ra. He was Ra-Ta. He was Ra-Ta, who, basically being in connection with Ra, And Ra worked with Ra-Ta to do a lot of things in educating the Egyptians after Atlantis fell.
Right, essentially to bring civilization back to Earth.
And had a big hand in the building of the Great Pyramid.
That's right.
Many years before modern-day anthropologists and archaeologists believe it was done.
Yes, because we all know that Atlantis was at the end of the last ice age, which was approximately 12,000 or so years ago. So back in the 10,000 BCs rather than the, 3,000 BCs, I'm sorry, that the Egyptologists say the pyramids came from.
And it's interesting that that Venus, was apparently inhabited with a third-dimensional civilization like our own, and I almost wonder that this wandering orbit that you're talking about, I wonder if maybe some sort of an atomic event or something like that may have created that strange orbit.
I don't know. I know of no sources that would talk about that, but most of them say, as Sitchin tends to say, that the havoc that was wreaked in the inner solar system usually came on a cyclical basis due to Nibiru, or Planet X, or Planet Nemesis, as it was called by the Greeks, which is, a very, very outer planet, but whose orbit comes dangerously close to that of Earth's, and at one point, even billions of years ago, far before human habitation here, sliced the planet Tiamat in two, creating the Earth, and the other part became the asteroid belt. And then the moon was captured by Earth at that point, and the moon had its own orbit beforehand, but then it was essentially forced around the Earth's orbit at that time. And Venus also was affected by some of these very early incursions, I'll call it, by Nibiru into the inner solar system, something that may only happen every 7 or even 14,000 years. Very, very far apart. So, we don't have any written records that go back that far, but there are oral traditions, and the Aboriginals talk about this, and other ancient cultures also mentioned this, and that even for the Sumerians, Venus was considered to be a little bit of an upstart. The way the text read is from Sitchin, Venus wanted a higher position. Venus was represented by Inanna to them, who was the granddaughter of the high god, or high planet, Nibiru. And so when she wanted a higher position, that meant that somehow she wanted a more favored orbit around the sun, and in doing so, she upset others of the planets that were going around the sun, including the Earth, which at that time was still not inhabited, probably. So it's very interesting to see how this very, very, very ancient history gets codified into mythology, and now codified by the crop circles to be brought back to our attention, just in the last generation.
And so, what exactly what does your intuition and your research tell you that they're trying to communicate to us about this transit?
Well, I think for me, what is being communicated about the transit is to understand that this is our moment of choice. That 2012, the Mayans pointed it out, and it's been pointed out by other ancient cultures, is the cusp between the astrological ages, and in fact, very likely, the cusp between not an ending point, because there is no, it's all cyclical. Once a cycle is being revolved around the great year of the 26,000 year cycle, where our part of the galaxy actually revolves around a larger part of the galaxy. We're out in a spiral arm. We're no ways near the center of our galaxy. In fact, there's some indications that we may not even really be in the Milky Way galaxy ourselves. We were originally in another smaller galaxy that is being taken over by the Milky Way galaxy. But that being as it may, 2012 represents an ending and a new beginning, or a turnover point. And the Venus cycle, which also comes to fruition with the second transit in June of this year, is that point at which energy can be opened in a time form that will have impact throughout the next whole set of the cycle, the next 26,000-year cycle, because not only will we align Venus, the Sun, and the Earth, but also the galactic center. And that is what the Mayans talked about, the great rift, or the womb, as they call it, of the mother in the galactic center of the Milky Way, that whose energy then will have impacts on the Earth. We're already getting more gamma ray energy right now for the last couple of years than we have at any time in recorded human history. And
not to mention the last few days.
Well, in just the last few days too. It's coming to a crescendo, you see. And the crescendo is at the transit and the lunar eclipse of June 4th, the transit being June 5th and 6th. And here out in the islands, the elders tell us, they say that this is the opening of what they call the Aloha Portal, that the portal can be used for bringing a spirit of aloha as they understand it out here. Aloha is sort of like shalom to the Hebrews. It means hello, goodbye, love, and in their own language it means sharing of a breath, that you share a breath with someone when you share aloha. And that's pretty intimate, to share breath with someone. How many people do you know on a daily basis that you actually breathe with them, or at close enough to them to be in their breath space?
Well, there's only one, and if there was any more, I'd be in some serious trouble.
You'd probably be in trouble, right? Well, in Polynesia, they have rather a little more loose definitions of those things. But in any case, aloha means literally to share breath with another person.
Interesting. So you're gathered there in Hawaii to work with these locals and First Nations wise people, particularly those with feminine energy.
Yes, particularly the grandmothers and the elders, although some of the elders are men as well. But the primary force seems to be the feminine ones, and they are the ones that have felt the call. And probably it's because we're moving into the Aquarian age astrologically, and we're swinging. The pendulum is about to begin to swing back from the over-mechanization. The Mayans said this, by the way. They said that our civilization would move to incredible mechanization and a lack of respect for life, as they called it, because machines aren't alive. And we would think everything could be done through a machine, so that you would give more credence and a benefit to a machine than you would to a living being. And, of course, the Earth Keepers all agree. And we're going to move back from that after this point, when this portal opens June 5th and 6th. And it may not be anything earth-shattering that you'll even notice, because just like in astrology, there'll be a transition period that's going to be taking place. And then on December 21st, when the actual complete alignment with the galactic center takes place, that will be like a blueprint that will be set down. And the choices we've made now will start to manifest on our planet.
Let me ask you this. You and those who gather with you there in Hawaii, what is the choice that you plan to be making?
Our choice is to set a firm intention, and we are not only people here in Hawaii, we have a global circle of light, and everyone, all your listeners are asked to join. Just remember where the Hawaii time zones are and figure out when the Venus transit is taking place in your time zone. And during that period, come and set your firm intention for a sustainable, earth-friendly future for the next 7 generations. That can be given in this spirit of aloha, that in a sense, we all share the same planetary breath. We are all the sons and daughters of one mother. And that's who we need to get back in touch with in whatever way. And to learn to use machines as our servants and as our helpmates, rather than consider them somehow to be indispensable and alive, living, breathing, and more important than sentient beings of whatever form.
A teacher or whatever.
Yes.
Stop anthropomorphizing them.
Exactly. And begin the pendulum swing back toward a more balanced world and a more balanced society. And it won't happen overnight. It's going to take some time, obviously. But the portal is opening with Venus and the alignment with the galactic center, and that won't come around again for 26,000 or more years. So that's why this particular time is so important. We will be anywhere between 90 and 150 people, and that's fine. We knew we could do this with 13 people. It didn't need more than that. So
we often talk on the program
that.
about the exponential nature of added intention. Each person adds exponentially to an order of magnitude as opposed to just simple multiplication.
Exactly, and we will also have Ancient Crystal Skull Synergy with us, and that synergy will be communicating directly through Pele, because we're on the island of Pele, which is a representation of the volcanic, not just fire, but of creating life. Because how do we create life on the Earth of new land? It comes through volcanic eruptions, and magma comes out and cools and creates new land out here. So Synergy will be taking the message to the very deepest parts of the planet, and then we will be sending it out to the sky. So it's a linking together of all three levels of reality, you might call it, with that intention of a positive and earth-friendly, sustainable environment for future development of not only the human race, but literally of all sentient life on the planet, as opposed to just mechanization.
Excellent. Now, you had said you had invited listeners to join with you in that intention. I just wanted to let listeners know we will research the times and post those, and send out a reminder on Facebook to do that at the proper time.
Yes, and you might want to tell them they can go to the website and see the times on the website. It's the number 4, the letter D, wisdom.org. And then go to the program page, and it will list the Venus transit times in Hawaii, and just figure out what Hawaii time is as to your local time.
And for those of you listening in the central time zone that I'm in, that's 5 hours ahead of Hawaii. So
right. In other words, you're 5 hours ahead of us, so it's sometime in the early evening for you.
Correct. So you mentioned the crystal skulls. And I know you've worked with the crystal skulls, for years. So how do they fit into this picture?
Well, they do. As I told you, the most incredible picture I think I've ever taken in my entire life was the one of the crystal skull sitting in the crop circle where the plasma vortex turned, and it was quite at the direction of the intelligence in the crystal skull that said to me, hey, you want a picture? This is the one to take. Just this very clear message as that. But it's been a great privilege for me to be able to work with several of them in this lifetime, going back to Max and also one called Shana Ra. Right now we're working closely with Synergy, who has a distinction of having been one of the few that has been out in the Pacific Ocean, not in the ocean itself, but in Lemuria, in the ancient islands that are down in the area of the South Pacific, has been in Hawaii in the past. Now, the current caretaker lives in Arizona, but she is bringing him here to Hawaii to be part of this ceremony so that we can make that connection. Because what happens is that memory is stored in stone and bone, as it were. It's stored in our human skull, and it's stored in the crystal of the earth. And when we do ceremony, and when we do energy work and create memory and create mutual set intention, it can be amplified and transmitted through crystal to the earth and actually out to the sky as well. These are forms of transmission that were known to the ancients, have never been lost.
To the Atlanteans, for sure.
Oh, even back, Synergy is Lemurian, which is fascinating. It goes well before Atlantis. But the Atlanteans also knew about crystal, and alas, in their arrogance, they ended up misusing the crystal. One lesson, just as a little bit of an aside, that I personally learned out of that is that this time around, we must not do battle. That was the mistake that I personally believe I was part of at the end of Atlantis. We felt that we could oppose the force that was using the crystals for wrong, for ill, for selfishness, and opposing that somehow counterbalance it. And all we did was make it worse. So this time, it's not about fighting, it's not about war, it's not about opposition, it is about inclusion. And that's why I say our global circle of light will be anyone who wants to participate, to simply go in a mutual positive intention for a sustainable future for the Earth, for our children, for the next 7 generations. You're very welcome, whatever your beliefs are.
You're saying you have soul memories of being in an Atlantean incarnation?
Alas, yes.
And
many of us do. And
that you were joined with the Sons of the Law of One, or the Sons of Belial?
Oh yes, right then, along no doubt with the one who's been called Edgar Casey when he was around this time. It's interesting, he died the year I was born, so...
You were born in 1945 then?
I was.
Okay.
I'm an atomic baby.
Very interesting stuff. Very interesting.
I came in between the tests in New Mexico and Hiroshima.
Wow.
So, and I'm not alone in that, by the way. Art Bell, Whitley Strieber, we're an interesting fraternity who chose apparently that particular moment to enter, to have an impact in this short lifetime, because the atomic energy is the ultimate in mechanization, you see. Liberating the atom force without aloha, without love, without life and respect for life is one of the greatest problems. And in a sense, it's what the Atlanteans did with crystal, we did with the atom, breaking the atom. But now, as I say to your listeners, the answer is not force. It is not opposing force with force. It is not war or any form of war in any kind. It is inclusion.
It's oneness.
It is to say, I can draw a circle that is bigger than yours and include you in with, we're all in the same boat together.
And we really are. I mean, we're on this planet together, and all these national boundaries are man-made inventions. That's not a thing of nature. And it sounds like you guys are trying to redirect our attention to nature, and so that's...
And I think the crop circles, you see, because they come in our food chain, they've been there as a guide for us, and they're saying, okay, come back and see what is really important, what is really going on that's important. And I haven't come to this position overnight. I've been kicking and screaming about a lot of this for a long time, and I've really come to understand that that's why we still have certain of the elders of the indigenous peoples, of the First Nations, of however you want to call them, scattered around the planet. And some of them are in white skins, by the way, or black skins. It doesn't really matter what your incarnate position right now is. They are coming together, we are coming together at this point to say, no, we don't need to follow the solutions of the past and the errors of the past. We can find common ground and a new way, a third way, if you like.
One tribe.
Of course. Ultimately, one circle.
So, knowing what you know, and after your years of research and study, at this point in time, how do you see the rest of 2012 unfolding?
Well, I see the rest of 2012 unfolding perhaps on the surface with a certain amount of drama, particularly in the natural forces, the let's call them you say tornadoes, hurricanes, storms, whatever. I think there's going to be a lot of electromagnetic activity simply because this is the culmination point, a turnover point, a changeover point. And it may well be that continues on into 13 and 14. I don't think it's just, it's not like you turn a switch on and it all lights up, and then you turn a switch off and it all lights off. There's a glow and an afterglow. It's like a cusp in astrology, sort of. I think that it's very possible and likely that those who were around during Atlantis and put us into this situation primarily because of their misuse of the energy of crystals are back, and some of them may be very tempted and try to do it again. That wouldn't surprise me at all. In my book, Mass Streams of the Future, which is 20 years old now, and some of the things have happened, some things have not happened, but a lot is coming around from it. I did foresee that there would be at least one more atomic explosion taking place, and so it wouldn't shock me to find it in the next 3 years, between now and 2015, that takes place. I personally feel it will be in some ancient religious center, because what it will do, hopefully, is to wake people up enough that they will say, "Ooh, enough of this already." But I'm maybe not entirely optimistic about that. I think we will need another wake-up call. We tend to forget very quickly what happened back in 1945.
But what about Fukushima?
Well, and
I think
that's part of the deal, isn't it? There is a force that has been unleashed there that I believe our governments are not telling us the truth about, that probably is going to create over time part of the culling off of the physical form of the human race. I think there's an awful lot of energy that's being released there that we're not being told about.
Well, there's definitely a lot of people who have. I mean, there's evidence that that's the case, and there's evidence showing up in the sea life now too, which is atrocious.
Exactly. And I don't know. We're like the Sorcerer's Apprentice with that. I don't think we know how to handle it. And perhaps, if we truly can demonstrate as a race, as the human race, about being one with the planet and with the cosmic energy that is part of 2012, because remember, we're turning over a new leaf too. We are entering into a new era. We may get some help, and I would welcome that help in whatever form, whether it's physical or non-physical. I personally believe that there's been more than one instance since 1945 in which humanity could have destroyed themselves if we had not been stopped. That's just my personal belief. I don't have any proof of it. There's been more than one time the bombs were about to fly, a la Dr. Strangelove, and something intervened that changed people's hearts and changed people's minds enough to stop that from happening. I don't think we're going to go back to a real atomic war. When I say an atomic explosion somewhere, I think that is the work of an extremist group or something, and it will perhaps unify the human race more than anything else. I wish I didn't believe that were necessary, but it may be. It may be. I don't say it is. I won't give it that credence, but I say that I have seen that in my personal visions of the period of time we're coming into. But on the other hand, on the positive side, I think that there's going to be that, they talked about the 1,000 points of light. I think there's going to be thousands of small groups of people spontaneously coming together, spontaneously demonstrating aloha, spontaneously showing shalom, salam, understanding our oneness as people, and are not only as our people, but with other sentient beings of the planet, the four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, the creepy crawlers, the fishes, the dolphins, whatever, that we will find ways to communicate with other species. That's to me the most positive and hopeful thing that I see in my lifetime still, a near future, will be that we will find ways to communicate with other species right here on our own planet and understand from their point of view how parochial we tend to be.
What about December 21st? What is, in your understanding and the research that you've done, I know that we'll talk a bit about mass streams of the future here in a second, but as for the event, do you have any ideas, or do you see anything happening at all?
I would say perhaps a time of celebration. Just celebrate and intuit that hey, this is the new era. This is the first day of the age of Aquarius. Call it that if you want, or whatever. Sort of like that wonderful musical Hair, which I saw back in 1969 on Broadway, and it's there, and say, hey, I'm celebrating that I'm seeing this. And I don't think that the day of December 21st is going to have something, extraordinary happen, just as I don't think the day of June 5th to 6th is necessarily going to have something extraordinary take place in the sky or something, under your feet right that particular day. I think it's a cumulative effect and is going to then push forward. It's like the first day of the rest of your life.
A pivot
That's what
point.
December 21st is.
Like a pivot point.
Yeah, the pivot point. Right now. Well, the pivot point is now. The pivot point is now, and the December 21st is when we first see the dawn or the new rays of the new beginning that we are putting together right now. This is the choice point. The Venus point is the choice point. And the Mayans and the ancients knew that. That's why they were so concerned with Venus and plotting Venus, and the Venus calendars and all of this of the Mayans is quite unique. But the Babylonians did the same thing, and the Egyptian astronomers did the same thing. So we're at the pivot point.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, Dr. Snow, on this show, in the last month or so, we've had a couple of global visualizations and meditations that we have implored our listeners to partake in, and it sounds like this is going to be not just one of those, but maybe the most important one of those. So we are going to make a push, not just now tonight on the show, but at the actual event, to join with you with your specific intention in mind at the specific time that you are at it. And we might not be with you guys physically on that point on the planet, but we will be we'll be joined with you.
That's our goal. As I said, we could have had 13 people here and it would have been enough. Actually, we're going to be 100 people here, which is even better. And we have gathered about a dozen of the elders, and it's been quite a journey to bring them to this spot too, along with Synergy and others, Earth Keepers, who are here to support the whole action and the whole energy. But the energy will come from all around the planet. It's not just in one place. It's just anchored. And the reason it's anchored here is two reasons. One is the transit is actually physically visible in daylight hours here in Hawaii. Hawaii and Alaska were the only two places of the American territory, and since we're American, that's why we're doing it from here. The other is that this is the land of Pele, like I said, who is really the regenerative goddess bringing new life here on the planet. New Earth is being born through the volcanoes that's happening out here. And finally, perhaps thirdly, like other ancient peoples, the Hawaiians, but even very more than other peoples, have been known for aloha. This is the aloha place of Earth, and aloha, the sharing of the breath, the bringing of the love, the bringing of the unity, of the consciousness of hospitality, as they say, is what we feel we need to concentrate on at this choice point, so that we will co-create that positive, sustainable future for the next 7 generations that we envision.
Excellent. We look forward to joining in with you on that. Real quick before we go, I want to talk a little bit about Mass Dreams of the Future. A couple questions real quick. Now, you wrote this book in the 80s, right? That's
right. It was first published in November of 1989.
And in it, there were sort of, you regressed a bunch of people and received kind of 4 different sets of people as far as what they saw in their own future lives.
Yes, 4 different environments is basically what I would call it.
Were they separate timelines? Were they like separate realities? Or are they
actually, I don't think so. Some people have thought that, and one time I entertained that as an idea, but I really think that this planet is certainly big enough. We right now have people who are living in the Stone Age still, and who have virtually no contact with the outside world and live in their own small communities. We have other people who, are talking about taking space flight into private enterprise and going out into the cosmos with it. Richard Branson and visionaries like that, who are going to take people up into the edge of space and back in a matter of years. So the 4 types of futures were not that distinct from each other that I think they could all be happening at the same time here on the Earth. Just for your listeners, very quickly, the first type is actually life in space, and we found that in the next 150 to 200 years, it is limited to exploration and colonies in our solar system. Then after that, it expands out beyond the solar system to types of life that may be like the crop circle intelligence, not entirely physical anymore, perhaps interdimensional life. Then the second type, I call them the New Age communities or the intentional communities, and they were people who had banded together and were using the power of the mind and spirit to create the reality around them. And these were, alas, in our subjects, at least the smallest group, only about 15% of the total. But still, that's like leaven in the loaf, right? And they were living sort of like in small rural communities, but outside of the main centers of population, and using the collective mental constructs that they were able to bring together in a way that is virtually impossible for us to think of today, but quite literally to create the atmosphere around where they were so that they could be together in artistic and creative pursuits. The third type, which was the majority, were, I call them the techies or the high-techs, and they were living primarily in some sort of dome or technology-controlled environments, of which we see the seeds today, and the mechanization was going even further, almost to the point of becoming, some of them saw themselves as sort of like Borgs, that wonderful creation of Roddenberry, where it's half a man, half machine type of thing that the Star Trek pioneers come up with. And then the fourth type were, I call them the rustics, and they saw themselves as coming back into a more simplified 19th century type of lifestyle. So somehow the beings that had chosen to incarnate there were eschewing the modern technologies and going back to more simple rural agricultural kind of lives. So all four could coexist, in my opinion.
And everybody is allowed that choice, which is
well, I do think this is a planet of choice, but we have both choice, privilege, and necessity.
But we don't really have that.
That's my idea, the 3 points of reincarnation. In other words, sometimes you have to reincarnate out of necessity. Sometimes it is a choice, and it's always a privilege.
So, have you continued that sort of research? I know you continue to do regression.
I did for a number of years, up until maybe 97 or 98, and I was getting pretty much the same things with small variations on that. So I haven't done any of those workshops in a number of years. It's very fascinating you would ask, because just this last fall at a conference we called Emergence, the Emergence Beyond 2012, we invited Raymond Moody, who, of course, is so famous for his work with the near-death experience.
Yep.
And he and I ran a workshop where we did, for about 40 people, do a regression or progression experience with them. It's the first group of that kind I've done in maybe 10 years. And the answers were very similar. They weren't that different than they had been before.
So there's not necessarily maybe a refined vision for the future since, in the last 3 years? Because I know with Casey, the stuff further in the future from his own death has either, the timeline has been off or it just hasn't happened. And as we make choices, we change the future. And so there's going to be things that don't happen the way that they were probably going to happen.
That's absolutely true. And in the near term, in my book, in the 21st century, many things have not happened. Some things have, many things have not, and that's only normal. When you go beyond that into a whole other lifetime experience, like the 23rd or 4th century, it's still being chosen today, and actually the visions that people have seen of that aren't that different than the ones from the 1980s. That's my experience in it. That's why I've never written anything else about it, because I just saw that it was basically being confirmed, details changing, but basic confirmation of the overall structure. And my own feeling has been that I have better things to do than that right now. And with the 2012 and my understanding from the crop circles and from the calendar, it is that this is the choice point that we need to make in our generation, and that if we do it, why then maybe all of a sudden a lot of that tech stuff will, if not disappear, instead of being 40% or 50%, it will suddenly be 10% of the population coming back. Like, again, reincarnation may be a necessity into that kind of thing for some souls, some people. That's what they need. We all have to balance the equations eventually. And the wonderful thing is that eternity is an awfully long time. Our souls are eternal, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and I think that the evidence would bear that out.
So when you think about it, one thing is that with all that we have the possibility to do and not do, we're not going to be bored.
Who's bored?
That's what I said. We're not going to be bored. No.
Not in a long time, anyway.
Much to do and to experience and ultimately to delight in. So with that, I think I'll leave you. That's my feeling of the 2012 should be looked at, especially the December time, as a celebration that say that yes, we've done it right and it's gonna work, and then we have a chance that it will.
Dr. Snow, we thank you for your work. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's been a pleasure, Tim.
I think that our listeners should go check out 4dwisdom.org and also check out chetsnow.com.
Right, just remember, it's the number 4, the letter D, wisdom.org. 4dwisdom.org. And also bear in mind that we will be posting those times for people to do a little visualization and meditation and kind of choose together the future that we want to have for ourselves and for our children. And I strongly recommend you light a candle. Fire is a really great conductor of energy.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye.
You can reach us at facebook.com/extraordinaryyear, one word. Like us, spread the word, and spread the light. So that's it for us on the 204th day before December 21st, 2012. Keep your ear to the ground and hold tight, kids. This is going to be an extraordinary year. Namaste.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Bravo. Won't make you read between the lines too many times. I'll give it to you straight. So I'll say what I feel today. Might make you uneasy, put you in a rage. Only when we're uncomfortable that the world ever seems to change. I am here to speak my mind. I am a living story, riding on the edge of time. I am that I am, and I know I am not alone. I am not alone. If I could have a moment of your time, where are your sisters? Speak to me, brothers. I am a part of us all, never apart from it all. I see the light. I stand beside you for a brand new day. We're sick of waiting. We think and choose as we see it. We all came out to be it and put the lie away. I am here to speak my mind. I am the tip of the iceberg, pushing through the other side. I am that I am, and I know I am not alone. I am not alone.
Not like you. I don't want to see it. You are not like me.